let's continue some of the commandments here that we have. We said we have 54 commandments in this week's Torah portion, and we went through a few of them yesterday. Went through about 10 or 12 of them yesterday. Here, let's have a count. We went through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We went to the commandment of to destroy all idolatry. That's 1, destroying all idolatry, and not to destroy anything that's holy, kodesh, like God's name and etc. To bring korban, the sacrifices that you have to bring when there's a temple, to bring them to the temple. Now we can't bring them at all. Two negative commandments: don't bring any sacrifices outside of the holy temple. That's a negative commandment. And also, don't bring up any sacrifice outside of the Ezra. And also another negative commandment, that not to sacrifice in any other place except. And we have a positive commandment: all the sacrifices must be in the holy temple. So that's already 6. To redeem holy things that have a blemish, you have to give the money until the holy temple, redeem it. 3 more commandments: not to eat Meiser Sheni, to take it up to Jerusalem, and not to eat any wine or oil, etc., outside of Jerusalem. That's already 10. Not to eat a firstborn animal outside of Jerusalem. Not to eat the meat of the Chatas offering or the Asham outside of the holy temple. This is for the Kohanim. And not to eat the meat of the Ola at all. The Ola meat, the Ola sacrifice has to be burnt up totally. Not to eat meat from the Kodshim before the blood is sprinkled. We did that yesterday, remember? The Kohanim are not only allowed to eat Bikurim, first fruits, outside of Jerusalem. That's already 15. Not to ignore the Levites. You have to provide for their needs. In the time when the Levites, when there was the holy temple, you have to provide for the needs. Oh, that's already 16. If you want to eat an animal, you have to slaughter it ritually. You want to eat a steak or something, you have to slaughter. You can't just cut off its head. You can't find a dead animal and eat it dead. You have to, there's a ritual slaughtering. The hard law is to learn. Shchita, it's called. Not to eat a limb taken from an animal before it dies. Not to, that's in addition to eating an animal for, that's forbidden for a non-Jew. A non-Jew can eat meat that was not slaughtered properly. Can find, roadkill or something that's permissible. A non-Jew not. A Jew, of course, can't eat. It has to be slaughtered. But in addition to that, a Jew cannot eat a limb taken from an animal before it dies. Now we're up to, I think, 19. You have to deal with the sacrifices. Even if you're outside of the land of Israel, if you sacrifice it, if you sanctify an animal, say, I'm going to bring this to the Holy Temple, you have to watch out that it doesn't become blemished and etc. And that's already 19, 20, 21. We have not to add on to the commandments of the Torah, and another one not to reduce from the numbers of the commandments of the Torah. And that's what we're going to start off this week's portion today. Here we have a few more. We have 5 more commandments. Not to tempt anyone to worship idols. Not to, one who tries to tempt you, don't have any love for him. Not to, and you must hate him, not to stop hating a person that convinces you to worship any idols, anything other than the creator of the universe. Negative commandments: don't save. If the person begs for his life, it's your best friend, too bad. He convinces somebody to worship idols, death punishment. Of course, nowadays there's no death punishment. But when there was in the time of the temple, something like in about 40, 50 years before the end of the second temple, they already stopped it. Negative commandment: not to be quiet. If you know anything bad to say about a person who convinces others to worship idols, that's bad. So in other words, the missionaries in Israel are not in a good situation legally according to the Torah. Let's do a few of the commandments that we already did. That's where we stopped last time. Okay, now let us continue on and learn a few more commandments. Here it is. A positive commandment. A positive commandment. So where is this? Here we go. Yes. A positive commandment that a court, a judicial court, has to interrogate the witnesses very well. 3 commandments. A positive commandment, if there's an Ir HaNidachas, one whole city that has gone and worshiped idols, you have to burn the whole thing down. No such thing nowadays. Next commandment. Negative commandment, not to rebuild it. Negative commandment, not to get any pleasure from any of the spoils of this city. Another commandment, I don't know where we're up to now in the numbers of commandments, but we're something probably like 25, more than halfway through. Negative commandment, not to make a slash in your flesh for idolatry. That was the way people used to show their. I once saw a movie long time ago, before I was religious, called Religions of the World. Pretty interesting. So, people they devote themselves to some sort of power. So, of course, in India, there's like 50,000 different types of religions. And I mean, maybe there's even more. I read somewhere that there's 40,000 different denominations of Christianity. In America alone, there's 200. Look it up in Google to see if it's true. In any case, in India, there certainly is no less. And there they have some really, serious religions. So there's some people that they stand on their hands all day. And then there's other people, they have all these other weird things. Anyway, I once saw there's this group in Japan and they cut off, make a whole big ceremony, and they have a little sort of a amphitheater, and they sit in the middle, and there's this little sort of a box, and on top of it, there's a little sort of a very sharp knife, and then they cut off a limb of their fingers. This is to show they serve their creator, or sort of whatever I don't know what they're serving, some sort of a power or something. So, in other words, there's a lot of very strange things in the world. In any case, don't do it, and not only not to do it, but also not to encourage it, and not only not to encourage it, but also not to make any mark in your flesh for idolatry. You're not allowed to wound yourself for idolatry. That's in addition to any other type of service, but that's a double sin. A negative commandment, not to make a korcha ala mate. It says that people, they used to, in mourning, they would go into mourning, so they make a slash on their hair. It says they would pull out their hair in the front for a dead person. You're not allowed to do that. Even a Jew, these are commandments for Jews. A negative commandment, it's a question of how many of these actually apply to the non-Jews as well, because a non-Jew is also forbidden idolatry. Christianity is really not allowed for the non-Jews also. It's not that, just leave us alone. You have your religion, we have ours. It's not so. If you look at what Shema Yisrael says, listen, Jews, now God is only our God. And the other religions, they worship also people. They worship people and powers and things like that. But in the future, Hashem Echad, God is going to be one. Mashiach is going to make that all of the religions of the world, they'll all drop their religions. Not because, we're going to force them to, because they'll realize that they're stupid. It says, Sheker Nachal Avateim, that they'll realize that their whole religions are lies, that they've been lied to. Okay, we'll talk about that a little bit today. Negative commandment. In other words, what are the religions? The religions are all ego trips. I want to go to heaven. I want this. I want that. And the true religion is to worship only the Creator, who's creating us for free. Not to think so much about yourself. I mean, you're already getting your whole being for free. Now you want another 5 cents or something. Negative commandment. not to eat sacrifices that have been disqualified. Another positive commandment, to check. You want to eat a bird? Go on, but you have to check the signs of a bird to see if they're kosher, if they're tome or tahor. Right? A bird, like you can't eat a crow. You want to eat a crow? Huh? Don't do it. What about a nice ostrich? Eating an ostrich? Sorry, not kosher. Chicken, okay. There's even a question. In order for it to eat, it has to be the signs that they have to have a crop and etc. They have to how the claws go. They can't be birds of prey. That's one of the big signs. A negative commandment: don't eat. The fact is, I really don't know if ostriches are not kosher. That's the fact. I don't know if they're not kosher or not. Could be, maybe they're kosher. Ostrich. I have to ask somebody. As far as I know, birds that they're not, they can't like grab onto something with their hands, and they're not kosher. Interesting. I never says. Samatuma. It says that. It says it has to. They have to have an extra finger on the back of their thing. I don't think an ostrich. Okay, interesting question. But I don't think ostriches are not kosher. In any case, you have to check the signs. There's no ostriches around here, so the question never arose in my mind. Here it says that some of the signs of a kosher bird. First of all, it has to be passed down from generation to generation. It has to be passed down. If all of a sudden a quail or something flies into your backyard, and you want to know if you can slaughter it or not, you have to go to a rabbi and say, listen, did people ever eat these things? Did you ever hear? Right? Are people eating them? If he said no, then you can't eat it, even if it has all the signs. It has to have an extra finger on the back of its leg, and it has to have what's called a zephik, like a crop, something like that. Anyway, okay. Negative commandment: not to eat impure grasshoppers and things. There are grasshoppers which are permissible to eat, but the ones that are not permissible, the Yemenites say they knew, and there's also some Moroccan Jews that also claim that they know, and they eat. Okay, negative commandment: not to eat a nevela. A nevela is an animal that was not slaughtered properly. It did not die properly. Died of old age, roadkill, or you did slaughter with a knife, but the knife had a little nick in it or something. Or when you slaughtered it, you delayed in slaughtering, you pushed the knife. A lot of very difficult and exact laws. Positive commandment: you have to give what's called Meiser Sheni. If you have food grown in the land of Israel, is you have to take what's called Truma and Meiser, and Trumat Meiser, and also what's called Meiser Sheni. It's another tenth of the food that you eat. You have to give that. That has to be given to the Levi. You could also redeem it and take it up to Jerusalem and eat it. Yeah. Meiser Sheni, the owners take it up to Jerusalem and they eat it up there. Right. If you want to, that what I said has to be given to the Levite. That's Meiser Rishon. Sorry, not that Meiser Rishon has to be given to the Levite. And Meiser Sheni, it says that it has to be eaten only in Jerusalem. Only in Jerusalem. Or if you want to, you can take the money from it and take the money up to Jerusalem and buy food up there with it. Positive commandment: you have to give what's called Meiser Oni on the third year, and on the sixth year, you take out on the third year, on the sixth year, you don't give this, you don't take the Meiser Sheni, you don't take this tenth and go up to Jerusalem and eat it. You give that produce to the poor. And let's just do the last one, and then we'll go to learn from the portion of the week. A positive commandment: to not collect any debts owed to you from before the sabbatical year. In other words, someone borrows from you $1,000, before the sabbatical year, comes along the sabbatical year, that's it. He doesn't have to pay you back. It says that Hillel saw that this had very not good effects because people simply weren't loaning money. They were afraid to get it back. So he made a thing called a prusbul, that you could sign this and give your debts over to the court, because technically this law that the seventh year negates all debts, only personal debts. But if they're debts that are owed to the court, right, to a judicial court, which is essentially just 3 Jews, then those debts can be collected. So they give over. That's called the prusbul. Okay, but the commandment is that on the 7th year you're supposed to shmita. You relinquish all debts. Let's just do one more. One more. 1 minute. I think we skipped one. Yep. No, we didn't. Okay. Positive commandment. Positive commandment that if a non-Jew, but if a Jew owes you money on the 7th year, it's supposed to be negated unless he makes this thing that's called a prusbul. That's if a Jew. But what about a non-Jew? A non-Jew, you can force him to pay. It says it's a nachri tigos. Okay, in other words, if he loans you money, then you can go and into his house and collect the debt. A Jew, you're not supposed to do that. A Jew, you're not supposed to do it, especially if it's a loan. If he borrowed money from you, he's not paying you back. A Jew, so it says you're only supposed to just remind him. You're not allowed to go and forcefully collect the money. There's exceptions to this law, but that's the general law. Let us now learn the portion of the week. So how many of the 54 commandments did we do here? We just got done with 22 of them, huh? 32. Okay. Yeah. Let us go to the Torah portion of the week. Here we go. Stop the share briefly. Go back and reshare. Oh, now let's learn the law of the false prophet. False prophet. All right, let's start it off. Here it starts off like this. God says, everything that I've commanded to you, this is the 13th chapter, this week's Torah reading. You should be careful to do. Don't add anything and don't detract. You cannot subtract anything from the Torah and you cannot add on to the Torah. What does it mean? You have to be careful. Litain lo taseh al aseh. More of a parsha. To add a negative commandment on the positive commandment. The positive commandment is you have to do the commandments. Be careful to fear God, love God. And another one is you have to be careful. That's positive. And also you have to be careful to do. In other words, a negative commandment, don't be, how do you say, too easy. Shekal shomer, shekal hishomer. There's lashon lotas. Anyone that says hishomer, beware. You don't get. There's no lashes for this because you're not doing anything. So you're not allowed to detract from the Torah. That's understandable. Don't detract. Don't say I'm not going to keep Shabbat. Let's do, 600 instead of 613 commandments. I'll do 612. Says you're not allowed to do that. And also don't add on. Namely, what do you mean add on? Why not add on? That's nice. It says to put on 5 compartments in your tefillin. To put on 5 different things on the lulav. There has to be a lulav and an esrog and a hadas and you want to also put over there a rose, why not? Don't do it. You're not allowed to. Or 4 blessings in the Brachas HaKohanim. The Kohanim, they give 3 blessings, and you say, why not add on a couple blessings? What's wrong with that? It says, you are not God. Don't try to play God. You're not allowed to add on commandments that God did not tell you to add on to. Now, the rabbis, what about the rabbis? The rabbis, they were enjoined to, first of all, make fences around the Torah and make certain things that would have been permissible to make them forbidden. For instance, muktzah, because the rabbis are told to make mishmar lemishmarti. They're allowed to, they're supposed to make, they're enjoined by the Torah. The Torah tells them to add on prohibitions and also to add on commandments. For instance, the lights of Hanukkah, reading the Megillah, etc. Lotosif, it says, because maybe a person will think that, I want to add things on. Nice idea, but maybe you'll add on something that's forbidden to God. Let's For instance, it says that there were some, the religions, they used to burn their children up for God. That's pretty nice. Burn up your son, your daughter, burn them up to Hashem. Of course, who do you want to burn up? The good ones, not the bad ones. So he says, listen, that's terrible. You can't do that. He says, why not? Why? I'm making a big sacrifice for the Lord. I'll put my son's picture up. I'll put a big wreath around him. It says, that's forbidden. You can't do a thing like that. You're not allowed to add commandments. He says, okay, you know what? So, all right, that was a really stupid thing. I won't do that. I'll burn my money. I'll take a $10 bill and I'll burn that up. What about that? He says, well, that's not as bad as burning up your son, as far as humanity goes. But as far as me, says God, it's equally bad. You're not allowed to add on commandments. Here in this case of burning up your son, so you're also murder. That's also forbidden. Burning your money. There's also bal tashchit, but it's not as bad as severe of a sin. But still, you're not allowed to add on to the commandments. And also don't take even besur sibas hamitzvah be'einecha, even if the reason for the commandment goes away, like Shlomo Bomer ani arbe velo asur. He said, I will add on commandments, right? I'll add on commandments, and don't worry about it. I won't do any sins. I'll add on. It says you're not supposed to have more than, 18 wives. So King Solomon said, listen, I know why, because 18 wives might drive you crazy, but not me. I'm the wisest man in the world. So he took more than 18 wives, and they did make him crazy. So don't add on commandments, even if you're sure that you understand the reason for the commandments and that you can avoid the bad repercussions. Don't try to play God. And here we have the example of someone that tries to add on or subtract commandments, the false prophet. The false prophet. Ki yakum b'kirbecha navi o cholam cholam, comes if there stands up a prophet. He tells the future, oh cholam cholam, or he makes dreams, dreamer. V'natan elecha otomot face, and he gives you a sign, right? He raises the dead, splits the sea. Let's see Rashi. Rashi says, not elecha ot, he gives you a sign in the heavens. Canaan, like it says by Gidon. Gidon vasita li ot. Gidon, God wanted him to go down and defeat the Palestinian, I don't remember what it was, but I think the Palestinian. And so he was very few, he didn't have many people. He started off with what it was like 20,000. I have to look in the thing again, 20,000 men, I think, 30,000. And God said, you got too many. Send anyone who is afraid should go home. So he was left with 3,000 men. He was fighting against an army of like 100,000 men. God said, nah, you got too many. Anyway, get rid of a few. He made another test. Everybody bent down to drink water. So then those people, he's left with 300 men. So he said, okay, fight with them. So Gideon said, listen, how can I fight against them? Maybe send me a sign. So God sent him a sign. It says that one of his spies went down and he heard somebody speaking in the camp, saying something that they were going to lose. And there's another example where it says, how do I know that I'm going to win my battles? You know what? Here, I'll put some wool on the ground and everything around it in the morning will be dry and it'll be wet. Then that's a sign from God. And then the next morning he said, okay, I want everything around it to be wet and it'll be dry. That was the sign from heaven. Mofet, it says in the earth. And he brings an example, right? Something physical will happen in the world. There's some people say that it's supposed to be exactly the opposite way around. That he brings the example. In any case, comes along a prophet and he does all sorts of miracles and he heals the sick, raises the dead, splits the sea, brings bread from heaven, knows how to what's going to go up in the stock market. Amazing advice. And then this is an amazing person. And what should you do to this person? Let's see. Here we go. Excuse me. Here we have HaChaim. If there is a Navi, says the HaChaim, it says the HaChaim, a Navi perish, even if he is a prophet. Even though you believe him, right? And he's a righteous Jew and he does all the commandments. But if he says to go and transgress any commandment, okay, if he tells you to transgress a commandment temporarily, like Eliyahu, like Elijah the prophet in Mount Carmel, right? You're not allowed to sacrifice sacrifices outside of the temple, and he did. So you're not allowed to do that. But he said this is a one-time thing, except for serving idols. But nevertheless, if he says this prophet, and he is a prophet, he's Elijah the prophet, and he says, we can not keep the Shabbos, one Shabbos, so you have to do it. But if he tells you to serve idolatry, even just one time, chayav misa, then you have to kill him. If he gives a sign, we have to. Why does it talk about first of the prophet, and he's giving a sign, and why does it just say it? Someone comes along and says to worship idols. Somebody comes along and says worship me, right? And then it says why? Omar alo navihu. It says that he's a navi. If there comes along a prophet, right? He comes along a prophet, so you know he's a prophet. Why do you have to tell him? And he does miracles for you. You know he's a prophet. What's the problem? It says that things like this. This is talking about a prophet that comes and he speaks in such a way like this. He says, he says to you, if I will make a big sign or a big miracle, then you should know that if this is a sign from God, that you should serve idols. So then and he does it. El adarabba la'aveh l'ta'ava u'l'shupra kamishpat harishon. He's coming just to improve his reputation, right? Why did you hear what he did yesterday? He raised a dead person. That's pretty good. But if he says and it comes, what he says that's going to happen, it happens exactly the order and the way that he says that it's going to come. Don't listen to him. Lo tishma, don't. You have to kill him. Hagam shelo tachlit b'devorav she'adu, even if you didn't serve yet. Ad boa otfal mofet, peim omrim la'avod. Even if the sign comes, and even if he says to you, listen, I want to show you a sign. If that sign comes, you should worship idols. Even if he didn't do the thing yet. Ochu lo omar oto mofet. Well, you shneim, there has to be both of them. Nevertheless, lo tishma. So it says, he just comes and he says, okay, everyone, I'm going to see the Empire State Building. I'm going to lift it up in the air. And then you should worship idols. Everybody say, oh yeah, you really can do that? That's pretty good. Let me just go and get my camera over here and I'll come right back, okay? What do? You immediately get rope, tie him up and bring him to the base then. Even if he didn't do anything. And even if he does do it, you come back and you see there's the Empire State Building standing up in the air. And everyone in there is yelling, screaming, help, help. He says, look, I am doing it. I am a messenger for the Lord. Don't listen to him. It's a commandment in the Torah to kill him. And it comes, even if it comes this sign. That he says, and then he says, let's go after Elohim Achirim, after other gods, that you didn't know, and let us serve them. What does it mean, other gods that you didn't know? Isaiah worshipped this idol. Moses worshipped this idol. A person comes along and says, I am the son of the Lord. You should worship me. And he does all sorts of amazing miracles. So one second, I don't understand. This is the one that Isaiah prophesied. I am the one. But Isaiah didn't worship the Son of God. He worshiped only, this is a new thing. You can't do that. You know what? Punishment is death. Lo tishma divrei navi. Don't listen to what he says. Because God is just testing you in order to know if you love God with all of your heart and with all of your soul. Yeah, there's a lot of different, very interesting explanations here, but let me just say a short thing. It says in Chassidut, it says, don't listen to this prophet or to this dreamer, because God is testing you, to know if you serve him or not. So, okay, you can simply ask, the simple meaning is that God wants to know what you'll do, just like Abraham, right? Abraham stood in 10 tests, and it was a big surprise to God, so to speak. Of course, God knows all the future, but still that a person actually does what God tells him to do, it gives a pleasure to God. This is nachas ruach. It's a pleasure to God if you do what God says. This doesn't make any sense at all, but that's the fact. It says that God, the sacrifices were a pleasure to God. Tanu oz le'elokim, you give power to God. So it's the same thing that God tests every Jew, in fact, every person, but the Jewish people they're really put under heavy scrutiny. It says God is sending you this false prophet. He's giving him power. He's giving this person power, and he's giving him credence. What is it? Credence. You believe in him. He's a believable person. He's a big tzaddik. He knows the whole Torah, like we had with Yerovim ben Nevat. Knew the whole Torah inside and out, all the secrets, knew everything. But he just made a couple of golden calves. Big deal. Right? It says a person like this, you're supposed to kill him. It's really quite amazing with Yerovim ben Nevat, because it says here's clearly in the Torah you're not supposed to do it. An idol golden calf, that's like really blatant sin. That's really a blatant sin. But nevertheless, okay, it's explained how we convinced everybody to do it. The fact of the matter is that everybody that served the idols, they all liked Yerovim ben Nevat, and worshiping idols is fun, and it's easy, and it pays off to a certain degree, because nobody would do it if it didn't. So it says, therefore, that's what it means. And here you have this person, he's doing all sorts of miracles, right? He finds a cure for, COVID or something like that. And he says, wow, this is my man. Finally I can take off my mask. I don't have to worry. This is great. Whatever he says, I'll do. Anybody that could do that, I am going to follow this man to the ends of the world. He says, okay, all I want you to do is make a little statue in your house, and, a statue of a flower, and bow down to it. That's all. Well, that's pretty easy. That's pretty easy. Nothing wrong with that. It's organic, Why not? So it says you have to kill him. Why is God giving such a person such powers? It says ladat, so that you will come to know God. Ladat means to be connected internally. To be connected internally, right? Somebody takes a gun and says, kill this person. You look at the person, you see that some evil Nazi or something, so you kill him. It says, okay, now I'll give you $1 million if you kill this next person. Good, who is it? Your mother. No. Hey, get out of here, you're nuts. 2 million. Do me a favor, go jump in the lake. 10 million. No, listen, there's no kind of, what about 50 million? 50 million, huh? Listen, she's sort of old, anyway. I mean, she's already 9 years old, and I really need the money, 100 million. That's pretty. All of a sudden, who are you really connected? What are you really connected to? Ladat, that means connection. What are you really connected to? Like to my mother, I wouldn't kill my own mother. 10 million? No, 10 million. When I think I'm going to sell myself in the street, 10 million. What about 100 million? Let's see the money. Huh? Oh, all of a sudden, you're not connected so much. Huh? You're connected to the money more. Now it's the same thing to see, are you really connected to God or not? And that was the whole thing of Kiddush Hashem. There were Jews who gave their lives not to deny God, right? In the Inquisition and those things, they said, come on, worship our religion, our God, and we won't kill you. Just all you have to do is just bow down. No big deal. And there were Jews that refused. There were Jews that refused. They said, I'm not going to make one small motion because I am connected to the Creator. He is my life. That's it. The soul is eternal. I'm not going to deny the soul one second. So that's it. God wants to, if you know, Ladat, to bring you, when you're put into this position, right? If the gun to your mother's head, it says, I'll give you $1 million. And you say, listen, no way, give me, you can take my life. I'm not going to do it. Oh, this is a sign that you're really devoted to your parents. That's a sign. But without that, you wouldn't have known. You wouldn't have known, right? I'll give you $1 million if you bow down to the church. Bow down to the million. No way, 10 million. I dropped that, 100 million. Okay. In other words, you have your price. So you weren't really connected. The 100 million was more. So here God is sending this false prophet, giving him all sorts of powers to bring you to that you should come to this level of being really connected to God with all of your heart and all of your soul. Let's just do one more over here. Okay, Acharei Hashem Elokei Telechu. After God you should go. You should fear. His commandments you should observe. His voice you should listen. Him you should serve. And him you should cling to. Let's see what Rashi has to say. Here it seems that you have this, 6 different levels of sight. You should walk, you should go, fear you should keep his commandments, listen to his voice, serve him, and cling to him. 6 different levels. Rashi deals with a few of them. Mitzvah Tishmor, the Torah of Moshe. It says his commandments, which are in the written Torah. Kol Tishmor, this is the commandments of the prophets. When the prophets come and warn you, you should listen. You should serve God in his holy temple. You should cling to him. What does it mean to cling to him? Cling to his ways. What does it mean? Give kindness. God only gives. You should also give. You should bury the dead. You should come and visit the sick. Just like God did all of these different cases. God went and visited Abraham when he was circumcised. That you should do, etc. Those are the things. Kindness, God always gives kindness to everyone. God creates us. That's pure kindness. Let's just see. Says the Ramban, you should go after God. This is a commandment that you should go after God's directions, God's directions alone. And Romano, and don't seek too much about the future. And only from the prophets. That's what it means. You should also serve and cling to him. Like it already says, God you should fear, he should serve, such you should cling to God's ways. Let's just see the HaChaim over here. Min haderech. Is this over here? No. See. No. I'm sorry. Divide further. And this prophet or this dreamer, kill him. Yumat, he should be killed. Kidiber Sora al Hashem, because he spoke against God that took you out of Egypt. Right? What's the first of the two commandments? I am God that took you out of Egypt. That's number one. Number two, don't worship any other gods. What are you giving? What are you giving any sort of service to a God that didn't take you out of Egypt? That's HaChaim. I took you from the house of slavery, and this joker is coming along to push you away from the path, this false prophet that God commanded you to go in. And bi'arto an Rabbi Kirbecha, you should get rid of the evil from your midst. Says the Or HaChaim, Bolomar comes to tell you that the reason that this prophet is going to be killed by the Chacham is because he came with davar shebo divreim al davar shu ikar klolos Torah. He's coming to push you away from the whole entire essence of the Torah, which is idolatry. Sheshakula keneged kol Torah, which is equal to all of the Torah. The fact is even if he comes and says you don't have to put on tefillin anymore, we learned that before. Any commandment you don't have to do anymore. Also is the punishment is death. But it comes to tell you that if you bought achaz mikol mitzvahs Hashem, ben cholem, ben navi, lo yamusu. But if he's trying to tell you not to do any of the other commandments except for this, then really you shouldn't kill him. Bala chalomos namar, it says, because he spoke foolishness. And the prophet is, if you know that he's a true prophet, then you should receive from him like Hara Carmel. So if he tells you to not do any of the other commandments, but just temporarily, then you should listen to him. But if he tells you just temporarily, one time, worship an idol, his punishment is death. But if he tells you permanently not to do any commandment, also the punishment is death. And now we have the law of the masit, a person that comes to try, doesn't do any signs, no miracles, but he just comes to try to convince you to serve other gods, right? Like the missionaries or something like that. Then those people, also the punishment is death. We'll talk about that, God willing, tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll pick another commandment and we'll do that as well. So have a good day with Mashiach now.